Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Legion Season 1, Episode 7. It's called Chapter 7. Full spoilers for the episode, as always. As was an exciting episode.
Oh yeah, it was, and oh man, so much.
Right from the get-go, it was very stylistic. I mean, this show's been stylistic all the way through, but
This took it to a whole other level, though.
right from the start, we had all this horror elements where it looks like there's a zombie thing going on, and it keeps
creepy as shit.
keeps cutting to the eyes. Kerry's running away from the eye through the halls of the hospital.
Yeah.
It's all very stylized, and we actually go back to before the end of last week, because last week ended with the whole, oh, it's Carrie inside the diving suit getting Sid. We actually go before that, and we see what happened when Oliver came for Carrie and took him back to his ice cube.
Yes,
Is what I'm calling it. And Oliver's very funny, by the way. It was kind of
convinced Melanie was Chinese.
he was like, so Japanese then? No, she's not Asian. Anyway,
He's like, are you sure? I distinctly remember it one night.
yeah. So that was all very funny, and there was almost this weird running joke where Carrie kept interrupting Oliver, and then when Carrie went to get Sid and tried to explain the plan to Sid, Sid kept interrupting and finishing his sentences. It was almost like a knock-on joke. It was good.
Yeah, it was.
It was pretty good. But yeah, so they basically sum everything up for us. We're inside his head. This is not a real place. We confirm it's the Shadow King that gets named.
Yeah,
That's taken over, and we have to try and solve the fact that some people are about to get shot. Sid and David are about to get shot in the room in the real world. We have to try and solve that, and we have to get everyone sort of out, have to wake everyone up, and we get this cool thing when he goes to Sid, Carrie. He gives her these glasses, which is very They Live, where they put it on and it goes black and white, but she can see what's not real, which is a little bit confusing to me because it's all not real.
I think it's meant to be. This is like the core of what David has created.
Right,
Like these rooms versus this is what the Shadow King is throwing at them.
That said, puts the glasses on, everything goes black and white, and it wasn't clear. It wasn't, at least there wasn't an element at first when this was happening. When she first finds Kerry and she finds Rudy, and she puts the glasses on them. I mean, that was all cool, but it's when things all start to collide later where it turns into a silent movie where
Yeah.
there's lots of music. And
Yes, you have Oliver conducting. It's I believe Bolero by Ravel, but there was the classic piece, and then it goes into this electronic remix of it.
Yes, and look at Connor showing off his music knowledge there with naming composers and whatnot. But so that's all goes down, and when he starts doing that, because he's trying to fix the bullet problem, she's trying to deal with that, because at this point, him, Melanie, and Carrie are all in the room, and they're trying to figure things out. They're kind of like they're in the real world, but it's still just their heads. They're still just not physical,
Yeah,
and they're trying to solve things. Although Carrie can still touch
it can interact with the headband.
Yeah, that was the one thing that was thrown me there. He can still touch that and move that.
Yeah, that's what was throwing me as well. And as soon as he puts it on, he kind of disappears. It's like, huh?
Well, I don't think it disappeared because of the headband went on. That was just coinciding with everything else.
It was, but it was like, how are you doing that? But then it's like you're not physically there.
Here's my explanation for this. That headband is designed to work with David's mind and his powers. I'm wondering if it's because of what it's designed to do, it can accept being touched and manipulated by things inside the head.
I suppose.
Maybe it's a stretch, but that's where I'm going with it.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah. But yeah, he starts conducting, and as this is going on, we have all the stuff in black and white with them with the glasses, and Kerry loses hers and the eyes coming after her, and that's all going on. And this is exactly when the Shadow King, as Lenny, decides to come after them, and the whole thing plays like a silent movie, where we actually get title cards for the dialogue.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's great stuff. Very stylistic, of course. And this is, of course, when it goes back into the room in the real world as well, it goes into the different aspect ratio. So we're switching up different styles and changes, and it's going all over the place. And the whole thing is just invigorating to watch. Meanwhile, of course, David's trying to like get control of his power, and that's ultimately what ends everything. Is David takes control, kind of thing, and he explodes everything, and they come back into the real world. But and don't worry, we're going to talk about the classroom scene. Don't worry, we'll
get there.
We're getting to that. But so yeah, it's great stuff. All of it's great, and the way Lenny just decides, oh yeah, the eye's an interesting threat, and he's been chasing Kerry, but I'm done with you. Bored now. Perfect reference
just
there.
Crumples him.
Just crumples him, and while this is happening in the real room, he's just like pouring blood from his head.
Yeah, it's really horrific.
Beautiful though.
Oh, absolutely.
Horrific in a beautiful way.
Yeah, yeah. Those two things are not mutually exclusive.
But so that's happening, and she's like, obviously, Kerry and Sid, they are completely screwed
Terrified,
here.
yeah.
They're on the floor. Lenny just has to cock her neck like that, and like both of them do the same thing, and like they're screwed. And it was Melanie whispering in the real Rudy in the real world who's been stabbed. Like because obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, the eyes subdued him so he can run in with a gun in the real world. Which is weird to talk about this because this happened at the end of episode 5. But it's been a while since this happened.
Been a while.
Yeah, we've been in this paused. Well, let's say paused. Really
Almost
slowed
paused.
down. Yeah, really slowed down to a crawl time in his head, and he actually managed to regain control inside his head to attack Lenny and stop her, at least for a little bit, while David is taking care of his end of things. So all these things are coinciding, and it's just fantastic. Everything comes together, and there's that great thing where you think David's sacrificing himself to save Sid when they all wake back up, but he actually catches the bullets.
Do you know what? For a second, I thought was happening. With the where the bullets were, they were kind of lower back. I was like, they're gonna put him in a wheelchair.
Oh,
Like,
right. I see.
for a second, I really considered that's what
Speaking
they were
of
doing.
wheelchairs,
We got a glimpse of one with a very specific wheel.
a very specific X-looking wheel, which this was just a quick flash. It was early on when Lenny was she was basically interrogating Amy,
Yes.
David's sister. She was about the night he came, and she's like, "I was 4." And quite rightly, Connor, do you remember anything from when you were 4?
Maybe vague little bits here and there. Nothing specific enough.
I don't remember jack shit from when I was 4.
I mean, I've got vague. I mean, I couldn't tell you I was exactly 4. I mean, around that ballpark.
I remember things with 5 because I remember being into things when I was 5.
That's fair. I mean, it's mainly things like when I was on holiday when I was 4. That's the sort of thing I remember because it was different.
It's
It wasn't,
distinct, alright.
yeah, and I think that's kind of what works for it here. It's such a different to usual event, which is why she remembers bits of it.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, I get maybe why she does remember is because maybe psychically things were going on and it's implanted them in her head because David, even as a baby, was like sending out psychic signals and doing all sorts of shenanigans, and that's all fine. But of course, let's go back now. Let's go back to how David manages to get the will to regain control. He's locked in the mine coffin and he's like freaking out. And then British. Is Dan Stevens British, by the way? Is that?
He is, yes.
Yeah,
He's from. I mean, he was made famous for Downton Abbey.
That's fair. I never watched Downton Abbey. That's fair. It's funny though because within about 2 lines of him speaking, I'm like, I bet he's actually British.
Do you know what I really noticed when his American accent? He's actually slightly higher pitched. I thought that's interesting.
I think that's normal.
Yeah.
When I say I think that's normal, I don't think it's normal that Americans are higher pitched than typical in Britain. I mean, when a British person does an American accent, I think it's actually really normal to go higher pitched.
No, I think it is, but it's something I'd never noticed until I kind of heard them contrasting their speaking to each other.
It's really hard to fake a deep American accent.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do examples. But I can do a typical kind of passable American accent for normal, but it is higher pitched.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's really hard to go low. It's really hard. You have to go up to put it on.
Yeah, there must be something about the inflections that it's just easier to go up.
But yeah, so it was funny because obviously there's a joke when he tries to fake a British accent during the scene, and the British version of him goes, "What was that meant to be a British accent?" They're like, it's funny playing with his voice. So it's good stuff. Fun. But this whole thing was really inventive because he basically says, right, imagine a classroom. This is your mind. All this is fake. You can just imagine a place. And they go into this really posh classroom, but it's very fancy.
Yeah, it's like a full lecture hall, isn't it?
Even for a lecture hall, I think it's quite fancy. The way it's got like a balcony with seats on it is really fancy.
I don't know. One of my lecture halls was in a balcony. Had a balcony.
Oh, that's really special. I'm used to the very typical kind of arched.
Yeah.
Like all the seats going up the way.
Yeah, no, we had one with a balcony.
With the place at the bottom, and then you've got a like a sort of library staircase thing to get up to the top of all the blackboards, big wall of blackboards. This is very, very swish. Is all I thought. I thought it's like when you think of a classroom, I think you typically think of a school classroom that's very desks and.
Yeah, normally I would agree with you.
Yeah, because like you say, you think of a lecture hall when you look at this.
Yes, definitely.
And so just when it cut there, I was like, oh, this is very posh, very swish, and aided, of course, with the lighting, but Very, very fancy. But this big wall of blackboards, and the British I was going to say Dan, British David. What's his name? And he's British, so it's hard to...
DA.
Yeah. But he's like, right, so let's put some bullet points, and he gets him to write up. He's adopted, and there's a parasite in him, and he starts recounting things, and he draws himself as a baby, and then his dad and his mum, and of course the dad's bald. Now, of course, it's just because he's doing stick figures, essentially, and it's just a simple, but it works for us that we know he's actually bald. But we get this really cool animated thing where they start coming to life, and they do like a 2D animation in the chalk on the boards.
Yeah, it was very, obviously you haven't seen it, but it's very reminiscent of what they just did in Moana. In the Disney film last year, they did the same thing with tattoos.
Okay. Cool. But no, really cool, really stylized, and it's basically him trying to just reorganize the events. Do you know what I think is really interesting about this show? And especially since we just did Iron Fist and we hated Iron Fist, and one of the big complaints about Iron Fist was that they kept repeating information ad nauseum, and it was really infuriating. What I feel this show's done that's very different to everything else, but it works really well, is that it started off so confusing, and then we keep getting more pieces, and then so a scene like with him, essentially just going over everything we already kind of knew, but putting it in clear black and white, chalkboard, clear black and white, this is what it is, in sequential events, is actually really fun, because it's finally confirming things that we've been speculating.
Yeah, and even beyond that, it works for, in case you hadn't speculated any of this, you need to know these things going into the final episode.
Yeah, not everyone gets together after an episode and talks about it like this. Some people just get confused.
And then even just say everyone did have this information, it's a recap at the end of the season, before you go into the final beats, but it does it in an inventive way. It's not just sitting around talking. It gives you this animation, this story. It makes something out of it that's unique, even if it is information you already know.
And one of the things we said in the Expanse review we just did earlier is that sometimes it's okay to repeat the information if the reactions from the person who's hearing it are worth seeing.
Yeah.
And in this case, David's kind of figuring this stuff out for himself the whole time. So he's realising that, he's a mutant and he's always had this, and this thing's been with him the entire time. And going into all this.
It's his self-realisation of what's going on that's important in this scene.
So it becomes important. It doesn't feel redundant. It doesn't feel pointless. It has a purpose.
Yes.
And it's an entertaining purpose at that. So as a result, not that I need to compare it to Iron Fist, I just thought that was an interesting thing.
That's almost insulting to this, to compare it to Iron Fist. Even to say, look how much better it is, it's still insulting to even think that they're both TV shows.
But the point I'm making, though, is that something that's so simple and fundamentally wrong with that show, this plays with it and does different things with it because it's smart enough to know how to do it, and why does it usually go this way? So if we change it, what do we do by changing it, and how do we change it up, and how do we mix it around?
Exactly.
Filmmaking, there's so many rules, but they're all there to be broken. But before you can start breaking them, you have to understand why they're there in the first place, and that's something that Iron Fist just does not understand. I don't think the people making that show understand the basic rules, at the very least, of writing. They don't understand writing scripts.
Whereas clearly Noah Hawley knows exactly what he's doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This was a thrill ride through and through. The tension of the start of the show, the fun of the animation, the silent horror movie-esque stuff we got with Lenny and Sid and that running away from him. All that stuff was great. It was a really entertaining episode. Of course, Oliver does not remember Melanie quite yet, so it looks like they're going to have to build up the relationship again. But of course, when they get back to the home base at the end of the episode, and they're going to go into the science lab because David's still wearing the thing because he can't take it off because Carrie's like, no, don't take it off, it's still in there. And we even see a shot at the end of Lenny in the coffin, like David was trying to get out.
It was perfect synergy because the first shot we saw of David in this episode was him frantically bashing on the lid of the coffin, screaming, and this just is Lenny doing the exact same.
But she gets out at the end, like she cracks it, and you see the yellow eye. Like she goes, proper Shadow King, and you see the eye, and that's when it cuts to the credits. It's like, damn. But of course, in the real world, it's actually, I can't even remember his name. I never bothered remembering his name because I thought he was dead. But the guy from the first episode who was interrogating David comes back at the end with all the soldiers, and he's all burned and scarred, and which is why we thought he was dead. But clearly, just highly injured.
Yeah.
And disfigured. But I liked him, though. I'm glad he's back because I thought he was good in the first episode. Yeah. So I'm glad he's popped back up. So because I was... Obviously, we still had to deal with the fact that it was inside him, but this episode did feel very conclusive, and then it kind of wrapped up a lot of the... I mean, the whole last episode was in his head, and this was them breaking out. It felt like, okay, we all know that this is in here. Even his sister knows he's a mutant. We know All the cards are on the table, essentially.
Yeah, it's ultimately as well. David's kind of completed his journey for the season. He's accepted who he is and what he is, and that he was sick, but not in the way he thought. And that's kind of what the season's been about. And it feels like he's accomplished that in this episode.
So now we're left with this confrontation in the real world, but also Shadow King's going to try and regain control, obviously. So it'll be interesting to see how we wrap this up next episode. I'm expecting, I don't know, I'm probably expecting a casualty, and I'm probably expecting some kind of cliffhanger, especially since we know we're getting season 2 now. It got renewed. Yeah. I'm okay with that if they want to end in a sort of... But at the same time, this season's been so focused on like the David realising who he is and sort of gaining control that, you know, I feel like it will feel quite well-rounded and feel like a proper concluded arc.
Yeah. And obviously, not everyone came out of David's head exactly as they were. Kerry and Carrie are now have a little bit of an issue with each other, sort of thing.
Yeah,
well, more Kerry.
Yeah, she's upset because he abandoned her. She was scared, and we seen them in the last. We talked about how sweet it was actually that they had to be in rooms next to each other, and how he was like, "I'm right next door if you need me." And he left. Now he left for good reasons, but from her perspective, she was just abandoned. She was left alone.
Yeah.
And she's struggling to deal with that, so she doesn't even want to combine with him right now because she's pissed at him.
Yeah.
And we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. My biggest problem with the episode is that Potomi just was there. Like, he wasn't there at all until he was in the room.
It's funny you say that because when they all snapped back into their bodies and it shows you Potomi snap back in, I was like, wait a minute, where was he all this episode?
Exactly. I was like, that was really weird.
And he was
what went on there?
And he was in the last one. He was like around.
Exactly. We know he was in the head. Like he was in there with all of them, but
if anything, you'd expect that, you know, maybe Sid and Kerry would have run into him at some point towards the end, just before everything went down, maybe. But it was weird. He just kind of was missing.
Because I kind of didn't notice he wasn't there until they showed.
But then, actually, now that we're talking about it, he did actually, because he still has his powers, kind of, in David's head, and he went back into the memory with his mother. Because remember, we've seen him in the last episode.
True. He was somewhere else.
Yeah, he went back into the memory with his mother, and then he was in his like little boy's clothes while he was a kid. In the room with her.
You're right.
So maybe he was inside his own memory, and that's why he wasn't around.
Okay.
Now, admittedly, I do think it would have been worth having a shot of that in this episode to show where he was.
Just to remind us and keep track of. We kind of kept track of everyone else, even Melanie, who didn't do a lot until they were out in the real world. Like they had that bit with her stepping out of the mirror and coming into with everyone else, just to remind us this is where she is.
Yeah, and the blood going upside down.
Yeah.
Before she finds Rudy.
Really cool imagery.
Yeah, really cool imagery. That show's been really good for that.
Yeah,
pretty much throughout. We had that sort of dancing musical sequence last episode with Lenny. And then this week we had the silent movie stuff, and I'm all in the animated chalkboard. I'm just wondering what happens next week. Like,
what can they possibly do to top that for a season final?
Claymation.
That's what all the best shows do, isn't it?
Claymation. We'll probably get a musical episode in season 2. There'll probably be.
Do you know what it is though? I would totally buy a musical episode of this show.
Oh, it makes sense. It's all in his head. It's just fine.
Exactly.
It can totally be that. It could be anything. Yeah. It can turn into a cartoon. It can turn into a digital Pixar-esque animated movie if it wants to for an episode or a scene, or it can do anything it wants. It's kind of built itself this platform to do all these wacky things, and that's cool.
It is cool.
And of course, the Shadow King is as creepy as always, and very, very lots of stuff with the eyes again, the walls, and just random moments where
I love those moments with when the eye just opens on the wall. It's like I'm watching you.
And then the music is like that really harsh cello kind of thing comes in.
Yeah, that big deep.
Yeah, probably double bass actually. Now I'm thinking about it, but like, you know, that harsh strings though, it just comes in.
Yeah.
Really, really good. So no, I love this episode, and I think there's maybe a couple episodes in the middle of this that maybe weren't as exciting as some of the other ones, but I feel like when you watch this as a whole, when it's complete, it's going to play really well as one thing.
Yeah, because those episodes are important to... While they were less exciting in their own right, they're so important to where we are now that you can't skip them.
Yeah, I think this will play fantastic. As an 8-episode binge, I think this is going to play wonderfully. Although I think binging it is going to lead to forgetting a lot of details.
I think binging it might leave you mentally broken, just trying to absorb all of it.
Yeah, which is funny because that kind of fits with the theme of the show.
It does.
This is definitely one I think I'll probably rewatch before season 2 hits.
Yeah, maybe one a night instead of
all over
one night like normal.
Yeah, but I think it'd be worth doing. Not that we'll do a video, because what's the point? We've reviewed it all already. We're here. But we've got one more. We've got episode 8. So we'll see how this conflict plays out with everyone and how the Shadow King will come into play in this last episode. But no. By the way, I love when Lemmy, as you know, Shadow King / Lemmy, showed up in the black and white segment, the silent movie section.
Yeah.
Her look changed.
Hair was all up.
It changed into this almost Charlie Chaplin-esque look, where she had the same sort of trousers that were kind of too big for her, and the way she was kind of carrying herself.
It was like she was playing, or like as the Shadow King was playing into the silent movie and having fun with it.
It's
like he was aware of what it was.
Yeah, it's funny, and it's like the fact is, it didn't even have to be silent. Like they established it went to black and white when the glasses went on.
Yeah.
Again, very They Live. If you've seen They Live, have you seen They Live, Connor?
I have not. It's on the watch list.
John Carpenter movie. It's when they put the glasses on, it goes black and white, but they can see what's really there in some cases that's been hidden by illusions or whatever. And who's really an alien, because there's aliens in that movie. That's kind of what's going on. But it was very reminiscent of that, and it's immediately what I thought of. But it was cool stuff. Okay, bit of a jump cut there. Now, sometimes we'll have little cuts if we have to edit something out, because there'll be a noise or there'll be a distraction, and normally we don't mention them because it doesn't matter. But this one's quite noticeable because I had a haircut in between the cut, so and I've got a different shirt on, so I felt like I had to acknowledge
it. Yeah,
I had to just be honest and say, yes, person came around to cut my hair, we had to pause and they were almost finished anyway. Connor had like 1 point left to make before I went into the outro, but just wanted to acknowledge it. So yes, I got a haircut, we're done. Connor, continue.
Yes, what I was going to say before all of that nonsense was that I really loved from the title cards in the silent section that you read it in their voices, especially Aubrey Plaza. I think it's all down to her acting in that scene. The way she just moves and she mouths like 1 or 2 words, but then you read the rest of it.
She's very emotive. She's very the way she sort of stamps her foot down and she sort of tilts her head, and everything she does is very like, you almost don't need the title, the dialogue card.
You don't, because you get what she's saying just from the way she acts.
And then
it's really impressive.
And when she looks over and she can tell that, you know, Oliver and Nat are trying to do something in the room to like fix things, and she's like, "I'll be right back." And then you get exactly what she's seeing just from the way she looks. Yeah, we do see it, but even before it cuts to it, you know what she's seen.
Yeah, it's because we saw an eye in the room, so it's like, oh, she's aware of it, and then she's like, "I'll be right back," and jumps into it.
You almost imagine as if like that, like they're played not exactly in sync, and that moment when she looks across is the moment from earlier on in the episode when we're with them in the room where you see the eye.
I think it almost is, yeah.
That's what it feels like. Yeah. Really cool. No, great episode, great style changes throughout and all the rest of it. And if I had the energy to do it, I would mess around with this video and turn to black and white at points and change aspect ratio and whatever. I'm not doing the title card though. That would be really annoying if I had to like type out what was said.
Yeah, that would be too much effort.
Yeah.
This might have been my favorite episode actually, because it really resolved a lot of the issues that we'd had going forward. Not like issues or problems, but as in the problems the characters were dealing with.
Oh yeah.
David in particular and his journey. And I feel like we got to the end of that journey almost for now.
Yeah, I feel like this one, the last one, and the first one have all been like the gold standard of the show.
Yeah. So like, I really feel like this one could have been the final episode of the season, because you had David deal with that, and then it's almost they get captured. You know, the people coming at the end, and you have Aubrey Plaza's, you know, she breaks up at the coffin.
Could be. I mean, I was almost thinking, like, what have they got left for next week now? It feels like everything's wrapping up. Yeah. And obviously they've given us something, and I'm sure it'll still feel like a culmination of this season. But this very much did feel like at the very least, the last 2 episodes all kind of came together in this one.
Yeah, definitely.
Because episode 5, they got to the room, bullets were fired.
Yeah.
Last episode, it was like them all in his head, and they were still in his head in this episode. And this was them getting out and solving the fact that they were getting shot at. Like, this was like a trilogy of episodes. These last 3.
I just want to say it's crazy that in an 8-episode season, we spent 2 full episodes. If you include the little bit at the end of the last, at the end of 5, and then the bit at the end of this where they're out, like 2 full episodes inside his head.
Pretty much.
That's really crazy. That's a quarter of the show.
Yeah. But if it's engrossing and it's fun, what does it matter?
No, it's not a complaint. It's just it's an odd structural thing that I noticed, that it's like, wow, this is so much of this show is just in here.
But I think that goes along with the whole sort of mantra of the show, which is, okay, David's not a normal character. He thinks of things differently. We have battles in minds. But when they're doing the chalk animation and you see Xavier having the mind battle, because at first it's like fists, and he's like, nah, they didn't fight with fists. And he's like, no, they fought in their minds in the astral plane, and you see the mental waves hitting each other. It's like, it's the idea that, okay, there's battles in this show, but they're not always going to be physical, flying things towards each other battles. There's battles that will take place in the mind, and that's what this season's really done for us. But because of that, they've really experimented with how do we tell that story. What can we do that's different to aid that story and be inventive and get things across in unique ways, because David thinks differently, so we'll present it differently. That's why we have different aspect ratios for certain things. That's why we go into these weird different things.
Yeah. I do feel like that's kind of why the show has been so successful, because it has been really creative in that sense. And maybe for some people that's jarring and a little bit disconnected, but for me it felt like this is what this show is. It's its own thing.
Oh, it is. But this is the thing. I think if you tell the story straight, it's nowhere near as interesting.
Absolutely.
The fact that they confused us and they made it like a puzzle to solve is what made it fascinating, because that also mirrors what David's going through. Everything's confusing to him. He can't quite make sense of it, but as time has went on, and in this episode specifically, he's put it together. He's kind of worked it out.
Even before this episode and the last one, we were already inside his head in the sense that we got how he felt at all times.
Yeah. So the fact that this is maybe the most straightforward episode makes sense, because it's the one where he kind of understands what's going on. So it puts us together in that sense. So no, it's perfect, and that's what it should do. It should make us relate to the characters 9 times out of 10. Obviously, there's examples where you don't want to relate to like a mass murderer or something like that, and you play it a little bit differently. But for the most part, that's what you want to do. You want us to feel the same thing as a character,
especially when it's your hero.
Exactly. And so no, looking forward to the finale. Very fun stuff. So let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. It helps us out a lot. Get us on Twitter at mild_fuzz for channel updates. Get our individual Twitters on the screen for everyday ramblings. Thanks for watching, guys. Have you got any vanilla?